Tonight, we're diving into 7 true cruise ship horror stories that will make you think twice about your next vacation at sea. These stories come from real people, crew members, passengers, doctors, and Coast Guard officers who saw things on cruise ships that still haunt them today. These aren't ghost stories or made-up tales. They're real accounts from people who were trapped on ships in the middle of the ocean when things went terribly wrong. We found these stories in old reports, interviews, and files that most people never get to see. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button for more true scary stories every week. Ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next video. So turn off the lights, get comfortable, and remember, when you're on a cruise ship, you're hundreds of miles from help. There's nowhere to run when something goes wrong. These are the stories the cruise companies don't want you to hear. My name is Dr. Sarah Kim, and I've been teaching marine biology for 15 years. I got my PhD from UC San Diego, and I've studied everything from tiny plankton to massive blue whales. I've been on research ships in storms that could flip a truck, and I've dove with great whites without breaking a sweat. But what happened on the Harmony of the Seas cruise in November 2023 changed everything I thought I knew about what lives in our oceans. Some things down there should never come up to meet us. I wasn't supposed to be working on this cruise. My husband Mark booked it as a family vacation. Just me, him, and our 2 kids, Emma and Jake. After a rough semester dealing with budget cuts at the university, I needed the break. But when the cruise director found out I was a marine biologist, she practically begged me to help with their educational programs. Just a few hours here and there, she said. The kids love learning about sea life. The Harmony of the Seas is one of those massive cruise ships, 1,188 feet long, 16 decks, holds over 6,000 passengers. It's like a floating city. The ship has everything: multiple pools, restaurants, theaters, even a rock climbing wall. But what interested me most was their marine observation deck on Deck 7, equipped with underwater cameras and sonar equipment for spotting whales and dolphins. On our first day out of Los Angeles, the weather was perfect. Calm seas, clear skies, temperature in the mid-70s. I spent the morning with a group of kids showing them how to use the ship's basic marine identification equipment. We spotted some bottlenose dolphins and a few sea lions. Normal stuff. The kind of wildlife you'd expect to see in these waters. The ship's chief officer, Captain Martinez, seemed happy to have me there. It's nice having a real expert on board, he told me. Usually we just point at whatever's out there and make our best guess. He showed me around the navigation bridge and introduced me to the sonar operator, a young guy named Danny who'd been working cruise ships for 3 years. That evening, my family and I had dinner at the main buffet. Mark was already planning what shore excursions we'd do in Mexico, and the kids were excited about the ship's arcade. Everything felt normal. Just another family vacation on a cruise ship with too much food and too many activities. But that night, around 2 a.m., I couldn't sleep. The ship's movement felt different. Not rough, just different. Like we were being followed by something that created its own current. I told myself it was just the ocean. Ships always feel weird when you're not used to them. On day 3, that's when things started getting strange. I was up early, around 6 a.m., having coffee on our balcony when Danny from the bridge approached me. He looked worried, which was unusual for someone who normally seemed pretty laid back. "Dr. Kim, can you take a look at something?" he asked. "The sonar's been picking up something weird since yesterday." I followed him to the bridge, where Captain Martinez was studying a sonar display with a frown. "Danny says you might be able to help us identify what this is," the captain said, pointing to the screen. What I saw made my stomach drop. The sonar showed something massive moving beneath us, about 200 feet down. At first glance, it looked like it could be a whale. Blue whales can get up to 100 feet long. But this thing was different. The sonar reading showed it was at least 400 feet long, and it had multiple appendages extending from its body. Appendages that moved independently. "How long has it been following us?" I asked. "Since yesterday morning," Danny replied. "It matches our speed exactly. When we slow down, it slows down. When we speed up, it speeds up." I studied the reading, as more carefully. Whatever this thing was, it didn't match any known marine animal. Whales don't have multiple independent limbs. Giant squids are big, but not 400 feet big, and they live much deeper than 200 feet during the day. "It's probably just a sonar glitch," Captain Martinez said, but I could tell he didn't believe it. "These old systems sometimes show phantom readings." "Can I monitor this for a few days?" I asked, "as a professional favor?" The captain agreed, and I spent the rest of the day checking the sonar readings every few hours. The thing, whatever it was, stayed with us. Always 200 feet down, always matching our course and speed. That night I decided to check the sonar around 2:47 a.m., right when I'd felt that strange ship movement the night before. What I found made my hands shake. The creature wasn't 200 feet down anymore. According to the sonar, it had surfaced to about 50 feet, and it was huge, much bigger than the readings had shown before. The appendages were clearly visible now, and they looked like tentacles. Dozens of them, each one at least 100 feet long. I grabbed the ship's night vision equipment and went out to the observation deck. The ocean was calm, almost perfectly still. But then, just for a few seconds, I saw something break the surface about 300 yards off our starboard side. It was covered in bioluminescent patterns, blue and green lights that pulsed across what looked like a massive body. The shape was wrong, though. It wasn't like any whale or squid I'd ever seen. It was too long, too flat, and those appendages, they ended in what looked like hands. Not fins, not suckers, but actual hands with long, thin fingers. I watched for another hour, but the thing didn't surface again. When I checked the sonar, it was back down to 200 feet, following us like nothing had happened. The next morning, I started documenting everything. Timestamps, sonar readings, weather conditions, ship speed, and heading. If this was a new species, I needed proper data. But part of me was starting to think this wasn't just about marine biology anymore. During my afternoon session with the kids, something strange happened. A little girl named Lucy, maybe 8 years old, came up to me with a drawing she'd made. "I drew the thing that's following our ship," she said. The drawing showed a massive octopus-like creature with glowing spots all over its body. But the creepiest part was the tentacles. Each one ended in what clearly looked like a human hand. And scattered across the creature's body were human faces, all with their mouths open like they were screaming. "Lucy, this is a very creative drawing," I said carefully. "But what makes you think something's following our ship?" "I dreamed about it," she said. "It talks to me at night. It says it's lonely and wants friends." I felt cold despite the warm afternoon sun. Have any other kids had dreams about sea creatures? Within 10 minutes, I had 12 children showing me drawings of the same thing. All of them had dreamed about a massive creature with tentacles that ended in human hands. All of them said it had spoken to them, asking them to come play in the water. That evening, I went to find Captain Martinez. I found him in his quarters, looking exhausted. "Captain, we need to talk about that sonar contact," I said. "Dr. Kim, I've been sailing for 23 years, he replied. "I've seen equipment malfunctions, underwater thermal layers, even military submarines, but I've never seen anything like this." "What do you mean?" He pulled out a tablet and showed me photos of the ship's hull taken by maintenance divers that afternoon. The metal was covered in scratch marks, long gouges that started at the waterline and went down about 20 feet. "These appeared overnight," he said. "Whatever made them has opposable thumbs. Look at the pattern. Those aren't random scrapes. Something grabbed onto our hull." The scratches looked exactly like claw marks, but they were enormous. Whatever had made them had hands the size of car doors. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. Around midnight, I heard screaming from somewhere on the ship. I threw on a robe and ran out into the hallway, where I found 3 other passengers standing by the elevators in their pajamas. "Did you hear that?" asked a woman from the cabin next to ours. We all had. It sounded like someone screaming for help, but the voice had come from outside the ship, from the water. A security guard arrived and told us to go back to our cabins, but I could see he was shaken too. Probably just seabirds, he said, but there were no seabirds 500 miles from shore at midnight. The next morning, I found out that 17 passengers had reported hearing voices in the water during the night. Voices of family members calling their names, asking them to jump overboard and come swimming. I spent that day reviewing footage from the ship's underwater cameras. Most of it was just empty blue water, but around 2:30 a.m., I found something that made me call Captain Martinez immediately. "You need to see this," I told him. The footage showed something impossible. A massive head rising up toward the camera, bigger than a school bus, covered in bioluminescent patches. But the worst part was the face. It wasn't entirely octopus-like. Parts of it looked human. The eyes were too intelligent, too aware, and when it opened what might have been a mouth, I could see rows of teeth arranged in patterns that reminded me of human dental work. "What in God's name is that thing?" Captain Martinez whispered. "I don't know," I said, "but I think it's been studying us." That night was when everything went bad. I was awakened around 2 a.m. by Mark shaking me. "Sarah, Emma's not in her bed." We found her on the balcony, still in her pajamas, climbing over the railing. If Mark hadn't grabbed her, she would have fallen 10 stories into the ocean. "Emma, what are you doing?" I asked. "Grandma's in the water," she said, her eyes unfocused. "She's calling me. She wants me to come swimming with her." My mother had died 3 years ago. Emma knew that. But Emma wasn't the only one. Security guards were running all over the ship, stopping passengers who were sleepwalking toward the railings. 12 people that night, all claiming they heard dead relatives calling them from the water. The next morning, passengers on the lower decks started reporting that they'd seen giant eyes looking through their portholes during the night. Eyes the size of dinner plates, glowing with that same blue-green bioluminescence. I realized the creature wasn't just following us anymore. It was learning about us, mimicking our voices, trying to lure us into the water. And it was getting bolder. On day 6, the ship's engines started acting up. Captain Martinez called me to the engine room, where the chief engineer showed us something impossible. "The propellers are tangled," he said, "but not with seaweed or fishing nets. Look at this." The underwater camera showed our massive propellers wrapped in what looked like thick cables. But the cables were moving. They were organic. Tentacles. "It's got us," Captain Martinez said quietly. That's when I felt the ship start to turn. We were no longer heading toward our planned destination. We were being pulled toward deeper water. The creature surfaced that afternoon, and I got it all on video. It was even bigger than the sonar had indicated, at least 500 feet long, with a body that looked like a horrific cross between an octopus and something almost human. Dozens of tentacles, each one thick as a tree trunk, each one ending in hands with fingers longer than a person's arm. But the most terrifying part was the faces. Scattered across its body were human faces, men, women, children, all with their eyes open, all moving their mouths like they were trying to speak. I realized these might be the faces of people who had answered its call over the years. People who had jumped into the ocean to join it. Passengers were screaming and running, but there was nowhere to go. The thing had wrapped around our hull like it was hugging us. The ship groaned under the pressure. That night, it started breaking through the windows. I was in our cabin with my family when we heard the glass shatter in the cabin below us. Through our balcony door, I could see a massive tentacle, thick as my body, feeling around inside the broken window. The hand at the end of it had fingers that looked almost human, except they were gray and covered in suckers. "Everyone stay quiet," I whispered to my family. But it was too late. More glass was breaking all over the ship. The creature had found a way inside. People were screaming, running through the hallways. I could hear the sound of tentacles slapping against the walls, and worse, the sound of people being dragged. I grabbed my family, and we ran for the upper decks. But the elevators weren't working. The creature had damaged the ship's power systems. We had to take the stairs, and with each floor we climbed, we could hear it getting closer. When we finally reached the top deck, I looked back at the ship and saw tentacles coming through windows on at least 6 different levels. And in the water around us, I could see more creatures, smaller ones, but still massive by any normal standard. The big one wasn't alone. It had brought friends. That's when I realized we were never going to make it to port. This thing didn't want to just study us or scare us. It wanted to take us home with it, down to whatever dark place it came from in the deep ocean. The last thing I remember clearly was standing on the top deck, watching tentacles as thick as telephone poles reaching up from the water toward us. My family was holding on to me, and I was holding on to them. But I could feel the creature's influence in my mind. That same voice that had called to the children, promising me that everything would be peaceful in the deep water. The Coast Guard found the harmony of the seas. 3 days later, drifting empty 800 miles west of our planned route. No passengers, no crew, no bodies. Just an empty ship with massive gouges in the hull and every window on the lower 6 decks shattered from the inside out. I was found alone in a life raft 50 miles away, with no memory of how I got there. My family was gone. Everyone was gone. The official report said it was a catastrophic mechanical failure followed by an evacuation where everyone except me was lost at sea. They said I was suffering from trauma-induced hallucinations. But I know what I saw down there, and I know my family didn't drown. They're still alive, somewhere in the deep ocean, with faces pressed against the creature's body, trying to call out to anyone who might listen. I don't teach marine biology anymore. I can't even look at the ocean without seeing those giant eyes staring back at me. But sometimes, late at night, I hear voices calling my name from storm drains and swimming pools and even my bathtub. They sound like my family. They want me to come join them in the deep water where it's peaceful and dark and you never have to worry about anything ever again. And someday, I think I will. My name is Mike Torres, and I've been a plumber in Detroit for 12 years. I fix pipes, unclog drains, and deal with the worst messes you can imagine. I've crawled through flooded basements, worked in buildings that should have been torn down years ago, and seen things that would make most people sick. Nothing really bothers me anymore. At least, that's what I thought before March 2024, when my wife Lisa and I took our first cruise vacation on the Celebrity Eclipse. What I filmed during those 2 weeks in the Atlantic Ocean still keeps me awake at night. The footage I'm about to share with you was found in the ship's waste system after we were officially reported as lost overboard. This is what really happened down there. Day 1, the dream vacation begins. Video diary entry, Mike speaking to camera. Hey there, future Mike. Lisa says I should record this whole trip so we can watch it when we're old and gray. Look at this place. It's like a floating city. We've got restaurants, pools, even a rock climbing wall. Lisa's already planning our whole schedule. Me? I just want to eat too much food and sleep in every morning. The ship is massive. I mean, I thought I knew big buildings from work, but this thing has 14 decks. That's 14 floors floating on water. The crew says there are almost 3,000 passengers on board. I keep getting lost trying to find our room. Good thing Lisa has a better sense of direction than me. Our cabin is small but nice. We're on deck 7, which the crew says is perfect. Not too high, not too low. I asked what was on the lower decks, and the steward just said storage and mechanical. Makes sense. Every big building needs its guts hidden somewhere. Day 2. Strange sounds. Video diary. Mike filming in hallway. Okay, so last night was weird. Lisa slept fine, but I kept hearing these sounds. At first I thought it was just his ship moving through water, you know. But around 2 a.m. it got really loud, like something heavy was scraping against metal way down below us. Audio picks up distant metallic scraping. There, you hear that? It's happening again. Sounds like someone's dragging a refrigerator across a concrete floor. But we're in the middle of the ocean. I asked Lisa if she heard it, but she just rolled over and told me to stop worrying. I know sounds, okay? 12 years of plumbing means you learn every noise a building can make. Water and pipes, air and vents, settling foundations. I know them all. This isn't any of those. This sounds angry. Day 3. Crew avoiding questions. Video diary. Mike in dining room. So I tried asking the crew about those sounds. The response was weird. Really weird. Our waiter, Carlos, just said, "Normal ship sounds, sir," and walked away fast. like really fast. Then I talked to one of the maintenance guys by the elevators. Soon as I mentioned hearing noises from the lower decks, his whole face changed. He looked around like someone might be listening, then just said, "Stay on passenger decks, sir, for your safety." For my safety? What does that even mean? Camera shows crew member walking past, actively avoiding eye contact. And look at this. I've been watching the crew all day. They walk around the upper decks fine. But I've noticed something. None of them go near the stairwells that lead down to decks 1 through 3. They use the service elevators, sure, but they travel in groups, always in groups. Lisa thinks I'm being paranoid, but I've worked construction sites. You know when workers are scared of something. Day 4. Finding the handprints. Video shaky, mic whispering. Lisa's at the spa, so I decided to do some exploring. Found a service door that wasn't locked properly on deck 4. The handle was sticky. Camera shows smear, a reddish-brown substance on door handle. That's not rust. I know rust. This is something else, something organic. Camera moves through maintenance corridor. The walls down here are different, more industrial, like the basements I work in. But look at this. Camera focuses on wall with large, dark handprints. These handprints are huge. My hands are pretty big from work, but these are massive. And look at the fingertips. Those aren't fingernails, those are claw marks, deep ones. The prints lead down the hallway, but the corridor gets darker. My phone's flashlight isn't great, but I can see more marks on the walls, like something large was moving through here, touching everything. Distant sound of metal scraping. Oh shit, it's happening again. During the day this time. Video cuts abruptly. Day 5. Kitchen whispers. Video diary. Mic in bathroom whispering. I made friends with one of the kitchen staff today, guy named Rodriguez. He's worked on ships for 15 years, says he's never seen anything like what's happening on this cruise. He told me food keeps going missing, not leftovers. I'm talking whole sides of beef, entire cases of chicken, raw meat mostly. The kind of stuff that should be locked up in cold storage. But here's the really weird part. The remaining food has bite marks, big ones. Rodriguez showed me a ham that looked like something with huge teeth had taken chunks out of it. He said the bite pattern was wrong for rats or any normal pest. When I asked if he reported it, he just laughed. Said the head chef told the staff to mind their own business and do their jobs. Rodriguez also mentioned that some of the crew have been showing up to work with bandages on their arms and legs. When asked what happened, they all say the same thing: accident in the kitchen. But Rodriguez has worked kitchens for 15 years. He knows the difference between a cooking accident and a bite mark. Day 6. Blocked passages. Video very dark. Phone flashlight illuminating makeshift barriers. Found my way back to the lower decks. This time, I went further. The maintenance corridors lead to what should be storage areas, but look at this. Camera shows wooden planks and metal sheets blocking doorways. These aren't official barriers. This is jury-rigged, like someone built them in a hurry. The wood has scratch marks all over it, and some of the metal is bent outward, like something was trying to break through from the other side. Mic touches barrier, wood creaks. The wood is solid, but listen to that. There's space behind there, empty space. And it smells wrong, like meat that's been sitting out too long. Scratching sound from behind barrier. Did you hear that? Something's moving back there, something big. Video shakes as Mike steps back. I'm getting out of here. Day 7. First sighting. Video timestamp shows 11:47 p.m. Lisa's asleep. I couldn't stop thinking about those barriers, so I went back. Brought a better flashlight this time. Beam shows gaps between wooden planks. There are spaces between the boards, small ones, but enough to see through. I'm going to try to get a look at what's back there. Camera pressed against gap, image dark and unclear. It's hard to see. Wait, there's movement. Vague shadow moves across frame. Oh my God, that's not a person. Look at the way it moves. It's on all fours, but it's too big to be human. The arms are too long, and the way it's crawling. Loud crash from behind barrier. It knows I'm here. It knows I'm watching. Camera shakes as Mike runs. I'm done. I'm not going back down there. Day 8. The sick passengers. Video diary. Mike in cabin during day. Last night, 6 passengers got food poisoning. At least that's what the ship's doctor is calling it. They're all in the medical bay, and none of their families are allowed to visit. I saw one of them being wheeled past our deck this morning. Guy named Peters, on from Iowa. I talked to him at the pool yesterday. Seemed fine then, but when I saw him on that gurney, he had bandages all over his arms and legs. Food poisoning doesn't cause wounds. Like that. Lisa says I'm becoming obsessed, and maybe she's right, but something is really wrong here. The crew is scared, passengers are getting hurt, and everyone's just pretending it's normal. I tried calling the Coast Guard on the ship's phone system, but the call wouldn't go through. The operator said there was interference from the storm, but it's been sunny all day. Day 9. Night kitchen visit. Video timestamp 2:33 a.m. Very dark. Couldn't sleep again. Decided to check out the kitchen area at night. Most of the crew should be off duty now. Camera shows empty kitchen, industrial equipment. Everything looks normal from here, but the walk-in freezers are at the back. That's where Rodriguez said the missing meat was stored. Moving through kitchen, flashlight beam dancing. The floor is sticky. My shoes are making this squelching sound with every step. In my line of work, you learn what different liquids feel like under your feet. This isn't water. This isn't grease. Camera points down, dark stains visible on floor. These stains lead toward the storage area, like something was dragged across the floor, leaving a trail. Sudden movement in shadows. What the hell was that? Camera swings toward movement, catches glimpse of tall, pale figure. That wasn't human. The proportions are all wrong. Too tall, arms too long, moving like it's hunting. Sound of running footsteps. I'm getting out of here right now. Day 10. Full creature sighting. Video shaky. Mike breathing heavily. I got it on camera. I actually got it on camera. Rewinding footage, pausing on blurry image. Look at this. This is what's been living in the lower decks. It used to be human. You can see the basic body structure, but something happened to it. The skin is completely pale, almost translucent. The arms and legs are stretched out like someone put a person on a rack. And the teeth, Jesus, look at those teeth. Rows of them like a shark. No human has teeth like that. The way it moved through the kitchen, it knew the layout perfectly, like it's been hunting there for a long time. I showed the footage to Lisa, and she finally believes me. She's scared now too. We tried to book a helicopter evacuation at the next port, but the ship's booking office said all emergency evacuations were currently unavailable. We're trapped out here with that thing. Day 11-14. The truth unfolds. Multiple video entries, increasingly desperate. I've been doing research, talking to passengers, crew members who'll still talk to me. The picture I'm getting is horrible. This thing used to be a passenger, a guy named Williams who fell overboard on this same route 6 months ago. But he didn't fall. He was taken, dragged down to the lower levels and kept alive. Living on raw meat, drinking seawater, isolated from sunlight and human contact, it changed him. His body adapted to survive, but he lost his mind. Maybe his humanity. The crew knows. They've been feeding it to keep it from hunting in passenger areas. Missing persons reports from previous cruises, dozens of them, all listed as accidental overboard, but their bodies were never found because they never went overboard. They're still on the ship, all of them. Day 15. Lisa disappears. Video timestamp 9:15 p.m. Mike's voice breaking. Lisa's gone. We were at dinner, she went to the bathroom, and she never came back. I found these by the service elevators. Camera shows drag marks on carpet leading to stairwell. She fought. Lisa's strong, she wouldn't go quietly. But whatever took her was stronger. I'm going down there. I know it's stupid, but I can't leave her with that thing. Camera shows Mike gathering flashlights, kitchen knife. If something happens to me, if this video is all that's left, don't take cruises on this route. Don't trust the crew. And whatever you do, never go to the lower decks alone. Day 16 to 17, The Lair. Video extremely dark, only illuminated by flashlight. Found her, found Lisa, but also found the truth. Camera reveals large space filled with human remains. This isn't just one creature. There are multiple victims down here in different stages of transformation. Some still look mostly human, others... Lisa's voice, weak but alive. Mike? Mike, is that you? Camera swings to show Lisa, injured but conscious. She's alive, but they've been feeding on her. Small amounts, keeping her conscious. That's how they do it. Keep the meat fresh. Multiple clicking sounds echo in darkness. They're coming. More of them. The creatures communicate with clicking sounds, and they hunt in packs now. My name is Dr. Jennifer Park, and I've been a ship's physician for 8 years. Before that, I spent 12 years as a family doctor in Portland, treating everything from broken bones to flu outbreaks. I thought I'd seen it all, until I took the job aboard the Allure of the Seas. The pay was incredible, and who doesn't want to travel the Mediterranean while working? But what happened during our October 2024 cruise changed everything I thought I knew about medicine. Some diseases aren't meant to be cured. They're meant to spread. The Allure of the Seas is like a floating city. 20 decks, 5,000 passengers, and a medical bay that rivals most small-town hospitals. We have everything. X-ray machines, surgical suites, even a small pharmacy. I've handled heart attacks, broken bones, and nasty food poisoning cases without breaking a sweat. The Mediterranean was beautiful that morning. Crystal blue water stretching to the horizon. Perfect weather for the first day of our 7-day cruise. I was reviewing passenger medical forms when the emergency call came through my radio. Dr. Park to pool deck 7 immediately. Man overboard situation. I grabbed my emergency kit and ran. When I got there, they were pulling Tom Bradley out of the water, 45 years old, auto mechanic from Detroit. He'd slipped on the wet deck and fallen 20 feet into the Mediterranean Sea. The crew got him out in about 20 minutes, but he was unconscious and not breathing. I worked on him for 10 minutes before he came back, coughing up seawater, shivering, but alive. His vital signs were good, but something felt wrong. His skin was cold, colder than it should be, even after being in the water. And it had this weird texture, almost rough to the touch. Just keep him warm and watch for signs of hypothermia, I told the nurses. Normal drowning protocol. I should have known nothing about Tom Bradley would be normal. Tom came to see me the next morning complaining about a fever and skin irritation. When I examined him, I found patches of raised, bumpy skin along his arms and chest. It looked almost like eczema, but the pattern was strange, like scales. It started last night, he said, scratching at his arms. Itches like crazy, and I keep feeling hot and cold at the same time. His temperature was 102 degrees. I prescribed antibiotics and told him to stay out of the sun, probably just an infection from the seawater. The Mediterranean isn't the cleanest ocean, but by evening, 3 more passengers showed up with similar symptoms. All of them had been in the main pool that afternoon. Same fever, same scaly skin irritation, same cold, rough texture when I touched them. I called the cruise director. We might have some kind of bacterial infection spreading through the pool system. I'm recommending we close all the pools until we can test the water. Absolutely not, he said. We have 5,000 passengers who paid for pool access. Just treat the symptoms. That was my first mistake, listening to him instead of my instincts. Tom came back and I barely recognized him. The scaly patches had spread across his entire torso and were starting to turn a greenish color. But worse than that were the slits on his neck. They looked like cuts at first, but when I examined them closer, they were opening and closing rhythmically, like gills. "Tom, when did these marks on your neck appear?" "This morning," he said, but his voice sounded different, raspier. "They don't hurt. Actually, they feel good when I'm in the shower, like I can breathe better." I stared at him. "Can you breathe better?" He nodded. "Especially when there's moisture in the air. Regular air feels thin." I ran every test I could think of. Blood work, cultures, even a CT scan. Everything C. Came back normal, except for one thing. His blood oxygen levels were higher than they should be, much higher. By that evening, 12 more passengers had the same symptoms. All of them had been swimming, either in the pools or in the ocean during our port stop. And all of them had been in contact with Tom at some point. I tried calling the CDC, but our satellite phone wasn't working. Neither was the internet. The communication officer said it was just a solar storm interfering with our signals. I didn't believe him. I woke up to screaming. Tom had broken out of the medical bay sometime during the night. Security found him in the main pool, underwater, for over 30 minutes. When they pulled him out, he wasn't unconscious. He was angry. "Why did you take me out?" he demanded. But the words came out wrong, mixed with clicking sounds and high-pitched whistles. I was fine in there. I was breathing. The gills on his neck were fully formed now, opening and closing as he spoke. His skin had turned a mottled green-brown color, and his fingers were starting to web together. When he opened his mouth to protest, I saw rows of sharp, pointed teeth. "Tom, we need to keep you under observation," I said, trying to stay calm. He lunged at me, not like a person having a breakdown, like a predator attacking prey. His new teeth snapped inches from my throat before security restrained him. That's when I noticed his eyes. The pupils had changed shape, becoming more oval. And there was a second eyelid, transparent, that blinked sideways across his eyeball. I sedated him and locked him in the isolation room. Then I went to check on the other infected passengers. 28 people now showed symptoms. Some were in early stages, just the fever and scaling. Others had gills forming. A few had the webbing between their fingers and the strange teeth. All of them kept asking when they could go swimming again. The transformation was accelerating. Tom's bone structure was changing. X-rays showed his skeleton becoming denser, his joints more flexible. His spine was elongating, and his ribcage was expanding to accommodate larger lungs, or whatever he was breathing with now. But the worst part was his brain scan. The areas responsible for human reasoning and language were shrinking. Meanwhile, the primitive brain centers, the parts that control hunting and survival instincts, were growing larger. He barely spoke English anymore. Just clicks and whistles, and sometimes these haunting songs that seemed to call to the other infected passengers. When I played recordings of whale sounds, he responded immediately, mimicking the patterns. I tried to examine one of the other patients, a woman named Sarah, who'd been infected on day 2. She bit me. Not a human bite. She tried to tear a chunk out of my arm with those new shark teeth. If I hadn't been wearing thick sleeves, she would have succeeded. "We need to evacuate the ship," I told the captain. "This isn't a disease. It's some kind of change. They're becoming something else." "Absolutely not. We're 4 days from port, and we have corporate investors on this cruise. We handle this quietly." That night, Tom escaped again. This time, he went overboard on purpose. We never found him. But we started finding other things. Fish in the ship's pools. Fish that had never been there before. The water filtration system was backing up, bringing in seawater faster than we could pump it out. And passengers were reporting strange sounds coming from the water pipes, singing sounds. 89 passengers were now showing symptoms of transformation. The early cases, the ones from day 2 and 3, were almost completely changed. They could stay underwater for hours. Their skin had become thick and scaly, their hands and feet webbed. They moved differently too, with a fluid grace that was beautiful and terrifying, and they were hunting. I found the first body in pool deck 3, a passenger named Mike, not infectee. D, floating face down. But he hadn't drowned. Something had taken bites out of him. Clean, efficient bites, like a shark. The security footage showed 3 of the transformed passengers, people I'd treated just days before, working together to drag Mike underwater. They moved like a pack of wolves, coordinating their attack. I ran to the captain with the footage, but he was gone. The bridge was empty except for strange wet footprints leading to the windows. That's when I realized the transformed passengers weren't just hunting randomly. They were taking the crew first, the people who could call for help. I tried the emergency radio, but all I got was that same singing sound Tom had been making. It was coming from everywhere now. The water pipes, the air vents, even the ocean around us. I was trapped on a ship full of monsters, and they were getting smarter. I woke up to find scales on my arms. Small ones at first, just rough patches of skin around my wrists. But they were spreading, and they had that same greenish color I'd seen on Tom. My throat felt scratchy, and I kept wanting to drink water. Lots of water. I ran to the medical bay and tested my blood. The results made my hands shake. My oxygen levels were spiking. My white blood cell count was changing. Whatever had infected the others was now in me. The ship was mostly quiet now. Most of the uninfected passengers had barricaded themselves on the upper decks, afraid to go near any water sources. But water was everywhere. The transformed passengers had somehow flooded the lower levels, turning them into hunting grounds. I could hear them down there, singing to each other in that haunting language, planning, coordinating, and part of me wanted to join them. The rational part of my mind knew this was wrong. I was a doctor. I was supposed to help people, not hunt them. But another part, a growing part, whispered that the water would feel so good on my new skin, that the hunt would be thrilling. I locked myself in my cabin and tried to write everything down, to leave some record of what had happened. But my hands were changing. My fingernails were growing longer and sharper. The webbing between my fingers made it hard to hold a pen. Outside my window, I could see shapes moving in the water. Dozens of them. The transformed passengers had gone into the ocean, but they hadn't left. They were circling the ship, waiting. For what? For me to join them? For the last of the uninfected to give up? Or for something else entirely? I can barely write anymore. My hands have changed too much, and my thoughts keep drifting away from human concerns to the sound of the water, the smell of the ocean, the hunger in my belly that can only be satisfied by fresh meat. But I have to finish this. Someone needs to know what happened here. The Coast Guard tried to board the ship this morning. I watched from my cabin window as the transformed passengers, my former patients, attacked the rescue boats. They moved through the water like dolphins, striking from below, dragging the guards into the depths. None of the guards survived. The military came next, helicopters and gunboats surrounding us. But by then, the lower decks were completely flooded, and the transformed passengers had turned the ship into their hunting ground. Any soldier who tried to board ended up in the water, where the creatures had every advantage. I could hear the radio chatter on my emergency scanner. Words like bioweapon and quarantine and terminate with extreme prejudice. They were going to sink the ship. Part of me was relieved. The human part, the doctor part, knew this couldn't spread. But the other part, the growing, hungry part, was angry. We were becoming something beautiful, something powerful. Why should we die for their fear? I felt my gills opening on my neck, taking in the humid air of the flooded cabin. My teeth had finished changing, rows of sharp points perfect for tearing flesh. My eyes had adapted for underwater vision, and my bones had become dense enough for deep diving. I was almost ready to join the others. But first, I had to leave this record. If you're reading this, stay away from the Mediterranean. The infection didn't die with the ship. I can feel it in the water, spreading to coastal areas, calling to others like Tom. Like me. We're not gone. We're just getting started. My name is Marcus Thompson, and I've been working construction for 15 years. Started right out of high school. Learned everything from my old man who worked the trades his whole life. I've built skyscrapers in Manhattan, worked oil rigs in the Gulf, even helped build bridges over some nasty rivers. Thought I'd seen every kind of dangerous job site there was. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened on the Royal Caribbean Voyager in December 2024. I wasn't supposed to be on that cruise ship. Hell, I'd never been on any cruise ship. But the company I work for got a contract to do some emergency repairs on their navigation equipment while the ship was at sea. Good money, they said. Easy work, they said. Just fly out to meet the ship when it docked in Boston, ride along for a week while we fixed their sonar systems, then fly home with a fat paycheck. The Voyager was massive, one of those floating cities that can hold over 4,000 passengers. When I first walked on board, I felt like an ant. The thing was 17 decks high, had its own shopping mall, restaurants, even a rock climbing wall. Most passengers were families on vacation, couples celebrating anniversaries, retired folks living it up. Normal people doing normal things. My job was simple enough. The ship's sonar array had been acting up for months, giving weird readings, sometimes going completely dead. The crew thought it was just old equipment, but the insurance company wanted it fixed before they'd renew the policy. I was part of a 3-man team brought in to replace the main sonar processors and recalibrate the whole system. The work was going fine for the first 2 days. We were sailing through the North Atlantic, heading toward Greenland. Cold as hell up there, but the ship was warm inside. The sonar equipment was housed in a room deep in the ship's belly, right next to the enduas, gene room. Lots of noise, lots of heat, but I'm used to working in tough conditions. It was on the 3rd day when things started getting strange. I was down in the sonar room around 10 a.m. running diagnostics on the new equipment we'd installed. Everything was working perfect, better than it had in years, according to the ship's navigation officer. But then the screen started showing something that didn't make sense. The sonar was picking up something on the ocean floor, something big. Now, the North Atlantic is deep. We're talking 3 miles down in some spots. Most of the time, sonar just shows you empty water and maybe some fish schools. But this thing, it was huge, bigger than the ship we were on, and it was shaped wrong, like nothing I'd ever seen on a construction site survey. "Hey, take a look at this," I called to Chief Navigation Officer Rodriguez. He was a good guy, been sailing for 20 years. "Your sonar's picking up some kind of structure down there." Rodriguez came over and looked at the screen. His face went pale. "That's impossible," he said. "There's nothing on the charts for this area. Nothing at all." The shape on the screen looked like buildings, but not any kind of buildings that made sense. They were twisted, with angles that hurt your eyes to look at. Some parts seemed to go deeper than others, like they were built into the ocean floor itself. "Could be a shipwreck," I suggested. But even as I said it, I knew that wasn't right. This thing was too big, too organized. Ships don't sink in perfect geometric patterns. Rodriguez got on his radio and called the captain. Within an hour, half the ship's crew was down in our little sonar room, staring at the screen. The captain ordered us to drop the underwater cameras to get a better look. That was our first mistake. The cameras went down on cables, recording everything as they descended. It took almost 30 minutes to reach the bottom. That's how deep we were. When the first images came back, everyone in the room went quiet. The ruins were massive, stone blocks the size of buildings, covered in carvings that seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at them. There were doorways big enough to drive a truck through and staircases that led down into darkness. The whole thing stretched out further than our cameras could see, but the worst part was how it made you feel just to look at it. Your head would start pounding, like someone was squeezing your skull. Your eyes would water, and you'd get this sick feeling in your stomach. A few of the crew members had to leave the room. "Get this footage up to the main screens," the captain ordered. "I want the passengers to see this. They paid for an adventure cruise. This is the discovery of a lifetime." That was our second mistake. Within an hour, they had the underwater footage playing on every TV screen on the ship. The dining rooms, the bars, even the TVs in people's cabins. Everyone was watching, amazed by what they were seeing. At first, it was exciting. Passengers were taking pictures of the screens, posting on social media about the amazing underwater ruins they'd discovered. But then people started getting sick. It started with the kids. A little girl in the main dining room suddenly got a nosebleed while watching the footage. Then her brother started shaking, like he was having a seizure. The ship's doctor rushed over, but before he could help, more people started having problems. Adults were getting massive headaches just from looking at the screens. Some people started throwing up. Others began speaking in what sounded like languages, but not any language anyone recognized. The words didn't sound human. By evening, almost 200 passengers had collapsed into comas. They weren't unconscious exactly, their eyes were open, and they were breathing fine. But they wouldn't respond to anything. They just lay there, staring at nothing, occasionally whispering things that didn't make sense. See. The captain ordered all the screens turned off, but it was too late. The damage was done. I was working late that night, trying to figure out if our new sonar equipment had somehow caused this mess. Maybe we'd installed something wrong, maybe there was some kind of feedback loop making people sick. But every test I ran came back normal. The equipment was working exactly the way it was supposed to. That's when I heard the whispering. It was coming from the medical bay, where they'd moved all the comatose passengers. I could hear it through the walls. Dozens of voices, all whispering the same things over and over. The old ones stirring, the deep calling, the time of awakening. I went to check on them, and what I saw still gives me nightmares. All 200 people were lying in rows on cots, their eyes wide open, their mouths moving in perfect sync. They were speaking together like some kind of horrible choir. And when I walked into the room, every single one of them turned to look at me. "You brought us to them," they said all at once. "The ones who wait in the deep places, the ones who dream of rising." I ran. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I ran straight back to the sonar room and started packing my tools. Whatever was happening on this ship, I wanted no part of it. But when I got to the sonar room, the equipment was running by itself. The screens were showing new images from the cameras below, even though no one was operating them. The ruins were different now. Lights were moving inside those massive doorways. Things were swimming around the structures, huge, dark shapes with too many arms. And the worst part? The sonar was showing movement. The entire structure was rising. Slowly but definitely rising toward the surface. The comatose passengers woke up on the third day. But they weren't the same people who'd fallen asleep. They knew things they shouldn't cue. Now, like exactly what the weather would be hours before it changed, or where every fish was swimming within miles of the ship. They talked about the ocean like it was alive, like it was thinking. "The depth bringer stirs," they said when anyone asked them questions. "It has chosen us to serve. It has chosen this vessel to be its herald." The captain tried to turn the ship around to get us away from whatever was down there, but the affected passengers wouldn't let us. They'd somehow learned how to operate the ship's systems. They sabotaged the navigation equipment I'd just finished fixing. They disabled the engines. They cut the communication system so we couldn't call for help. "We're going home," they said, "back to the deep places where we belong." That's when I saw it. The thing they called the depth bringer. I was up on deck trying to figure out how to get off this floating nightmare when the ocean around our ship turned completely black. Not dark blue like deep water usually looks, black like oil, like ink. And there were shapes moving under the surface, massive shapes that were too big to be whales, too strange to be anything that belonged in our world. Then it surfaced. I can't really describe what the depth bringer looked like, because it was too big to see all at once. Part of it looked like a mountain rising from the sea. Part of it looked like a building made of flesh and tentacles. It had eyes, dozens of them, each one the size of a house, and they were all looking at our ship. The affected passengers all went up on deck and started singing. Not in English, not in any human language. They were calling to that thing, welcoming it, and it was responding. I could feel it inside my head pressing against my thoughts, trying to get in. "Join us," the passengers kept saying to those of us who were still normal. "Feel the deep wisdom. Become one with the eternal waters." Some people did. They walked right up to the affected passengers and let them touch their foreheads, Within seconds, their eyes went wide and they started singing that ho, ribble song too. But not everyone gave in. There were maybe 50 of us left who were still fighting it. We barricaded ourselves in the ship's emergency station and tried to figure out how to survive. The thing in the water wasn't trying to destroy the ship. It wanted the people on it. It fed on human minds somehow, and the more people it controlled, the stronger it got. The affected passengers had incredible strength now, and they all moved like they shared one mind. They could predict everything we were going to do before we did it. We held out for 2 more days. 2 days of that singing, of that presence pressing against our thoughts, of those massive eyes staring up at us from the black water. Some of my fellow survivors couldn't take it. They opened the doors and walked out to join the others. On the final day, there were only 12 of us left. That's when the rescue ships arrived. I still don't know how they found us. Our communications were down, our GPS wasn't working. But 3 Coast Guard cutters came out of the fog like angels. The thing in the water, the depth bringer, sank back down when it saw them coming. The affected passengers collapsed like someone had cut their strings. The rescuers found us and airlifted the survivors off the ship. They left the Voyager floating there, along with the 3,000 people still on board. Said it was a quarantine situation and that specialists would handle it. I never saw the ship again. The news reported that it was a technical malfunction that caused some kind of mass hallucination event. They said everyone on board was fine, just needed medical observation. But I know better. I've been living in a small apartment in Kansas ever since, as far from the ocean as I can get. But it doesn't matter. I can still feel that thing down there in the deep places. Every night I dream about those ruins, and every morning when I wake up, the bathtub water looks more inviting than it should. I think about the ocean all the time now, about how peaceful it must be down there in the darkness, swimming with the old ones who wait for the time of awakening. Sometimes I catch myself driving toward the coast without realizing it. Sometimes I find myself looking up cruise ship schedules online. The truth is, I don't think I really escaped at all. I think that thing just let me go so I could tell this story, so more people would know about the ruins and the depth bringer and all the beautiful, terrible things that sleep beneath the waves. Because every time someone hears this story, every time someone imagines those impossible ruins, a little part of them goes down into the deep places too. And the old ones get a little bit stronger. They're still waiting down there, still calling, still singing their ancient songs. And sometimes, late at night, I find myself singing along. My name is Sarah Martinez, and I've been working ship security for Royal Caribbean for 8 years. I started as a deck patrol officer right after college and worked my way up to senior security coordinator on the Voyager-class ships. I've handled everything from medical emergencies to drunk passengers, missing person cases, and even a few serious crimes at sea. The ocean can be dangerous, but honestly, most of our problems come from people drinking too much and making bad choices. I thought I'd seen it all after 8 years on these floating cities. But what happened during our December 2019 Caribbean cruise changed everything I thought I knew about safety at sea. What I found in that crew member's cabin still keeps me up at night, and the security footage we recovered tells a story that Royal Caribbean never wanted the public to see. The Voyager was running our standard 7-day Caribbean route in December 2019. We had about 3,200 passengers on board, plus roughly 1,400 crew members. December cruises are always busy with families on winter break, college kids celebrating the holidays, and couples getting away from the cold. The ship was nearly at full capacity. I was working the night shift that week, which meant I was responsible for deck patrols from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. My main job was monitoring the security cameras from the control room, responding to incidents, and doing physical walks around the passenger areas every 2 hours. We had 12 security cameras on each deck, plus additional cameras in the elevators, stairwells, and common areas. The whole system was monitored 24/7, and everything was recorded on hard drives that we kept for 6 months. That particular night was December 18th. We'd left Cozumel that afternoon and were heading toward our final stop in Jamaica. The weather was perfect, calm seas, clear skies, about 78 degrees. Most passengers had spent The day, drinking at the beach, so I expected a relatively quiet night once everyone passed out. I was working alone that shift because one of our other security officers had called in sick with food poisoning. My supervisor, Jim Peterson, was handling the upper decks while I covered decks 3 through 8. We had radio contact every hour and I could call him immediately if anything serious happened. Around midnight, I was doing my routine camera check when I noticed something odd on the Deck 5 monitor. A young woman was stumbling down the hallway, clearly drunk, bouncing off the walls as she walked. That wasn't unusual by itself. We see drunk passengers every night. But she seemed more disoriented than normal, almost like she was sleepwalking. I watched her on the cameras as she tried several cabin doors before finding one that opened. She went inside and the door closed behind her. I made a note in the logbook. Deck 5, cabin 5247, intoxicated passenger entered wrong cabin at 12:17 a.m. I figured she'd realize her mistake in a few minutes and find her way back to her own room. About 30 minutes later, my radio crackled to life. It was Jim calling from Deck 9. "Sarah, I've got a guest here looking for her friend. Says her roommate went missing from the bar around midnight. Young woman, early 20s, brown hair, wearing a red dress. You seen anything?" I checked my notes. "Actually, yeah. I've got a drunk passenger who went into the wrong cabin on Deck 5 about 30 minutes ago. Cabin 5247. She hasn't come back out. Can you go check on her? Guest services is getting worried." I grabbed my radio and master keycard and headed down to Deck 5. The hallways were empty except for the usual hum of the ship's engines and air conditioning. Cabin 5247 was at the end of the hallway, right next to the emergency exit. I knocked on the door. "Security, everything okay in the..." "Done?" No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. "Royal Caribbean Security, I need to check on a passenger." Still nothing. I used my master key to open the door and immediately something felt wrong. The room was completely dark, but there was a strange chemical smell in the air, kind of like the photography darkroom I used in high school. And I could hear a weird clicking sound coming from inside, like a camera taking pictures over and over again. "Hello? This is ship security. I'm coming in to check on you." I flipped the light switch, but nothing happened. The overhead lights weren't working. I pulled out my flashlight and stepped inside. That's when I saw them. Hundreds of photographs covering every inch of the walls. Pictures of passengers sleeping in their beds, showering, changing clothes, walking around their cabins. Some were clearly taken through windows or doors. Others looked like they were shot with a hidden camera. And in the center of it all was the girl in the red dress, passed out on the bed. She was breathing but completely unconscious. I immediately called Jim on my radio. "Code yellow on Deck 5, cabin 5247. I need backup right now." The radio just gave me static. I tried again. "Jim, this is Sarah. I've got a situation on Deck 5. Respond." Nothing but white noise. I checked my phone to call the control room directly, but I had no signal. That was impossible. We had cell towers on the ship that provided coverage throughout the entire vessel. I turned back to examine the room more carefully. The photographs weren't just random shots. They were organized, sorted by location, by time of day, by type of activity. Someone had been systematically photographing passengers for weeks, maybe months. I found photos of the girl on the bed from earlier that day, pictures of her at breakfast, by the pool, at the bar. Someone had been following her around the ship, documenting her every move. In the corner of the room, I spotted a video camera on a tripod. Its red recording light was blinking directly at me. I moved toward it to shut it off, but my flashlight beam caught something else. More cameras. Small ones, hidden in the air vents, behind picture frames, inside what looked like smoke detectors. This wasn't just some pervert taking photos. This was a full surveillance operation. I heard footsteps in the hallway outside, slow and deliberate. Then the sound of keys jingling and someone humming quietly to themselves. The footsteps were getting closer. I quickly moved toward the girl on the bed to wake her up, but she was completely out. I could barely detect a pulse. Whatever she'd been given was serious. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. I turned off my flashlight and looked around for somewhere to hide. The bathroom was too obvious, and the closet was full of photography equipment. The only option was under the bed. I crawled underneath just as the door opened. Work boots walked slowly into the room. I could smell cigarette smoke and that chemical developer smell getting stronger. The person was humming some tune I didn't recognize. Through the crack between the bed frame and the floor, I watched the boots move around the room. They stopped at different cameras, adjusting angles, checking equipment. This person knew exactly where everything was. I heard the sound of the video camera being moved, repositioned. Then more camera clicks, lots of them, coming from different directions. Multiple cameras were taking pictures of the unconscious girl. I tried to stay completely still, but my heart was pounding so loud I was sure it could be heard. My radio was clipped to my belt, and I slowly reached for it to try calling for help again. That's when my phone buzzed with a text message. In the dead silence of that room, the notification sound echoed like a gunshot. The camera clicking stopped immediately. The work boots stopped moving. Then slowly they turned toward the bed where I was hiding. A voice whispered, "I know you're under there, little mouse." A hand reached down toward me, and in the dim light I could see a janitorial badge clipped to the person's shirt. It read, "Carlos, housekeeping." I had two choices: stay hidden and hope he'd go away, or fight my way out. Carlos was a crew member, which meant he had access to every part of the ship. He knew these hallways better than I did, and he'd obviously been doing this for a long time without getting caught. His fingers were almost touching my arm when I made my decision. I bit down on his hand as hard as I could, tasting blood immediately. He screamed and jerked his hand back, giving me just enough time to scramble out from under the bed. Carlos lunged after me, but he tripped over his camera equipment. Photographs scattered across the floor as tripods and lights crashed down. I ran for the door, but Carlos was right behind me. I could hear him cursing in Spanish as he fought to get untangled from his equipment. I burst into the hallway and started running toward the elevator, screaming for help at the top of my lungs. But it was 1:30 in the morning, and the passenger decks were empty. The thick walls and heavy carpeting on cruise ships are designed to muffle sound, so my voice wasn't carrying far. I reached the elevator and hammered the call button, but it was taking forever. I could hear Carlos coming down the hallway behind me, his keys jingling with every step. I ran toward the emergency stairwell instead. I had my master key so I could access any part of the ship. My plan was to get to the crew areas where there might be other people awake, but when I tried my key card on the stairwell door, nothing happened. The light stayed red. I tried it again. Still nothing. Carlos appeared at the end of the hallway, and I could see he was holding something in his hand. It looked like a syringe. "You shouldn't have seen that room," he called out. His accent was thick, but his English was clear. "Now we have a problem." I started banging on passenger cabin doors, hoping someone would wise, key up, and let me in. But it was the middle of the night, and people were either passed out from drinking or sleeping too deeply to hear me. Carlos was walking toward me slowly, almost casually. He wasn't in a hurry because he knew I was trapped. The elevator wasn't coming, the stairwell was locked, and no one was answering their doors. "How long have you been doing this?" I asked, trying to buy time. "Long enough," he said. "Passengers never pay attention to housekeeping. We're invisible to you people. I can go anywhere, do anything, and no one notices." "What did you give her?" "Just something to help her sleep. She won't remember any of this." He smiled, and I saw several gold teeth. "Neither will you." I was running out of hallway. At the end was just a large window looking out at the ocean. Behind me was Carlos with his syringe. That's when I remembered the emergency alarm. Every deck had a fire alarm that would alert the entire security team and wake up everyone in the surrounding cabins. I ran toward the alarm panel and smashed the glass with my elbow. The sirens started blaring immediately, and emergency lights began flashing throughout the hallway. Carlos cursed and started running toward me, but it was too late. I could already hear voices and footsteps coming from the stairwells. Doors were opening as passengers came out to see what was happening. But Carlos wasn't giving up. He grabbed me from behind and tried to inject me with the syringe, but I elbowed him in the ribs and broke free just as the first passengers appeared in the hallway. "Help me!" I screamed. "This man is trying to drug me!" Carlos looked around at all the witnesses and realized he was caught. He dropped the syringe and tried to run, but Jim Peterson appeared from the stairwell with 2 other security officers. We arrested Carlos immediately and secured him in the ship's holding cell. The unconscious girl, her name was Megan, was taken to the medical center where they pumped her stomach and got her stabilized. She woke up about 6 hours later with no memory of anything after leaving the bar. When we searched Carlos's real cabin, we found thousands more photographs and dozens of videos going back almost 2 years. He'd been photographing and filming passengers on multiple ships throughout the Caribbean. We also found evidence that he was selling the images online to private collectors. The FBI met us when we docked in Miami and took Carlos into custody. He's currently serving 15 years in federal prison for multiple counts of voyeurism, assault, and possession of illegal surveillance equipment. Royal Caribbean tried to keep the whole incident quiet. They offered Megan a settlement and asked her to sign a non-disclosure agreement. They transferred me to a different ship and gave me a promotion, which I think was their way of buying my silence too. But I've never been able to forget what I saw in that room. How many passengers had Carlos drugged and photographed without their knowledge? How many other crew members might be doing the same thing on other ships? I still work for Royal Caribbean, but I'm more careful now. I check my room for cameras every time I travel. I pay attention to housekeeping staff and other crew members in ways I never did before. And I always trust my instincts when something feels wrong. The photography equipment we seized filled an entire evidence room. The FBI told me they'd identified victims on at least 12 different cruise ships. Carlos wasn't working alone. He was part of a network. They're still investigating. My name is Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, and I've been with the United States Coast Guard for 15 years. I started as a young officer right out of the Coast Guard Academy, worked my way up through search and rescue operations, maritime law enforcement, and vessel inspections. I've pulled bodies from stormy seas, chased drug runners through the night, and boarded ships in conditions that would make most people sick. In all those years, I thought I'd seen everything the ocean could throw at me. But what happened in September 2021, about 200 miles off the coast of North Carolina, changed everything I thought I knew about the sea and the people who sail on it. I was serving as the executive officer aboard the Coast Guard cutter Resolute, a 210-foot medium endurance cutter. We were on routine patrol when we got the call that would haunt me forever. A cruise ship had gone dark on radar. No distress signal, no communication, nothing. The Norwegian Epic, a massive cruise ship carrying over 4,200 passengers and crew, had simply vanished from all tracking systems. It was a calm Tuesday morning when our radio crackled to life. Coast Guard Cutter Resolute, this is Coast Guard Sector Virginia Beach. We have a priority tasking for you. Large cruise vessel, Norwegian Epic, last known position approximately 180 miles southeast of Cape Hatteras. Vessel has gone silent for over 12 hours. No response to radio calls. Satellite tracking shows vessel still moving, but erratically. You are tasked to locate and investigate. Captain Rodriguez turned to me. XO, get the boarding team ready, full inspection gear. Something doesn't feel right about this one. He was more right than he could have ever imagined. We found the Norwegian Epic 3 hours later, and from a distance, everything looked normal. The ship was massive, over 1,000 feet long, gleaming white in the afternoon sets. It was moving slowly through the water, maybe 5 knots, in a wide, lazy circle. No distress flags, no obvious damage, no smoke. Just a giant cruise ship sailing in circles like a lost whale. Norwegian Epic, Norwegian Epic. This is United States Coast Guard Cutter Resolute. Please respond on channel 16. Nothing. Our radio operator tried every channel, every frequency. Silence. Captain, I reported. Ship appears to be under power. Navigation lights are functioning. No visible distress signals, but I'm not seeing any movement on deck. No crew, no passengers, nothing. Through my binoculars, I could see the pool decks, the walking areas, the balconies. Empty. Completely empty. On a ship that size, carrying over 4,000 people, you should see someone, somewhere. Kids running around, people sunbathing, crew members working. But the ship looked like a ghost town floating on the ocean. Prepare the boarding party, Captain Rodriguez ordered. Mitchell, you're leading this one. Take Petty Officer Santos, Petty Officer Kim, and Seaman Johnson. Full safety gear. I want constant radio contact. As our small boat approached the cruise ship's hull, I felt something I'd never experienced in all my years at sea. The water around the ship was perfectly calm, almost mirror-like, even though there was a decent chop everywhere else. It was like the ocean itself was holding its breath around that vessel. We used the ship's tender platform to board. The platform was down, which was strange. It should have been secured for sea travel, but it made our job easier. As soon as we stepped onto the ship, I knew something was very wrong. The first thing that hit me was the smell. Not a bad smell exactly, but wrong. It smelled like breakfast, bacon, eggs, coffee, but too strong, like someone had been cooking the same meal over and over for hours. The lights were on, the air conditioning was running, everything seemed normal, but there wasn't a single person anywhere. Resolute, this is boarding team leader, I radioed back to our ship. We're on board. Ship appears to be in normal operation. Power, lights, everything functioning, but no sign of any personnel. We moved through the ship systematically. The dining rooms had tables set for breakfast, food still on the plates. Some of it was still warm. Coffee was still brewing in the machines. In the kids' area, toys were scattered everywhere. Stuffed animals, coloring books, crayons, like children had just been playing and suddenly left. Petty Officer Santos was checking the bridge while I examined the passenger areas. Lieutenant Commander, his voice came through my radio. You need to see this. The ship's on autopilot, engines running normally, but the navigation system shows we've been sailing in the same pattern for almost 18 hours. I made my way to the bridge. Santos was right. The ship's computer showed they'd been making the same wide circle over and over since about 3 a.m. All the navigation equipment was working perfectly, all the safety systems were green, but it was like someone had programmed the ship to just sail in circles forever. Any sign of the crew? I asked. Nothing. Bridge is completely abandoned. Coffee's still hot in the captain's mug. That's when Petty Officer Kim's voice crackled through the radio from somewhere deep in the ship. Ma'am, I think I found someone. Deck 7, supply room 12. You need to get down here. We rushed down to Deck 7. Kim was standing outside a supply closet, looking shaken. Inside, curled up in the corner behind boxes of cleaning supplies, was a man. Mid-30s, wearing passenger clothes, khaki shorts and a t-shirt that said Ohio State. He was rocking back and forth, staring at nothing, mumbling something over and over. Sir? I knelt down next to him. Sir, I'm Lieutenant Commander Mitchell with the Coast Guard. Are you injured? Where is everyone? He looked at me, but his eyes were empty, like looking into deep water. The voice told us to come home, he whispered. The voice told us to come home. What voice? Who told you to come home? The voice told us to come home. The voice told us to come home. He just kept repeating it. We got him back to our cutter for medical evaluation. Our corpsman checked him out. Physically, he was fine, just dehydrated and in shock. But mentally, he was somewhere else entirely. It took hours before we could get any real information from him. His name was Danny Morrison, 34, a grocery store manager from Columbus, Ohio. He was on the cruise with his wife and 2 kids, a 7-year-old boy and a 5-year-old girl. When he finally started talking, the story he told us made no sense. According to Danny, everything had been normal for the first 2 days of the cruise. His family was having a great time, enjoying the pools, the shows, the food. But on the 3rd day, he started noticing something strange. People were acting different, moving slower, talking less, spending long periods just staring at the ocean. My wife Sarah started doing it too, he told me, his voice shaky. She'd stand on our balcony for hours, just looking at the water. When I asked her what she was looking at, she'd say she could hear something calling, but I couldn't hear anything. He said it got worse each day. More and more passengers and crew members would gather on the upper decks, especially at night, just standing there, looking out at the ocean. They'd hum together, the same tune, but nobody seemed to know they were doing it. The voice started on the fourth night, Danny continued, coming through the ship's speakers during the announcements. Real quiet at first, underneath the normal stuff about dinner times and shows. But I could hear it. It was telling people to come to the water, to come home to the deep. I asked him why he didn't report this to the ship's crew. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. The crew was doing it too. By the fifth day, even the captain was standing on the bridge just staring at the ocean for hours. The only reason I didn't fall under whatever spell they were all under was because I stayed in our cabin with the door locked and the TV turned up loud. But on the final night, he said, everyone gathered on deck 12, all 4,200 people on that ship. Danny watched from the porthole in his cabin as thousands of passengers and crew members walked slowly, calmly to the upper deck. They moved like sleepwalkers, all in perfect formation. They lined up at the railing, Danny whispered, tears streaming down his face. All of them. My wife, my kids, everyone. They stood there in rows, thousands of people, and they were humming that same tune. Then the voice came over the speakers one last time. It said, "It's time to go home to the water." And they all just stepped forward. Danny broke down completely at this point. According to him, 4,200 people had simply walked off the cruise ship into the middle of the ocean, just stepped off the edge like they were getting off a bus. Of course, we thought he was having some kind of breakdown. Nobody just walks off a ship. There would be bodies, debris, something. But our search of the surrounding waters turned up nothing. No bodies, no life preservers, no personal belongings floating in the water. It was like 40,200 people had just vanished into thin air. The investigation that followed was the strangest of my career. We brought in the FBI, maritime investigators, psychologists, everyone. The ship's security cameras had recorded everything, and what we saw defied explanation. The footage showed exactly what Danny had described. For days, passengers and crew gradually changed their behavior. People would stop mid-conversation and walk to the nearest window or deck to stare at the ocean. Children would leave their games and stand motionless at the railings. By the fourth day, almost everyone on the ship was moving in these slow, trance-like states. But the most disturbing footage was from the ship's communication room. A passenger who had boarded under the name David Miller had accessed the ship's PA system with some kind of electronic device. He'd plugged it directly into the ship's communication network. From that point on, every announcement, every piece of music, every sound that came through the ship's speakers carried this low-frequency signal underneath it. The audio experts who analyzed the recordings said the frequency was below normal human hearing, but it was designed to affect brainwave patterns. Essentially, it was a form of mass hypnosis broadcast throughout the entire ship for days. The final security footage showed the gathering on Deck 12 at exactly 3:17 a.m. Just like Danny said, all 4,200 people lined up at the ship's edge. They stood there in perfect silence for almost 10 minutes. Then, as one, they all stepped forward into the darkness. The camera feeds cut to static immediately after. We never found David Miller. His ticket had been purchased with untraceable cryptocurrency just hours before the ship departed. The device he used was destroyed, melted down to unrecognizable metal in the communication room. All that remained were some research notes about mass aquatic migration patterns and frequency-based behavioral modification. Danny Morrison was the sole survivor, and honestly, I'm not sure he really survived. We kept him under observation for weeks. He never stopped staring at the ocean, never stopped whispering about voices calling from beneath the waves. The last time I saw him, he told me he could still hear them calling, that someday he'd have to go home to the water too. The official report listed it as maritime disaster, cause unknown. The media was told there had been a mechanical failure and tragic accident, but those of us who were there, who saw the footage, who heard Danny's story, we know the truth. Something took those 4,200 people, something from the deep ocean that could reach into their minds and call them home. I retired from the Coast Guard 6 DOS months later. I couldn't do it anymore. Every ship we boarded, every rescue we performed, I kept expecting to find another empty vessel. I moved as far from the ocean as I could get to a small town in Montana. But even here, hundreds of miles from any large body of water, I sometimes wake up at night thinking I can hear something calling from far away. A voice promising peace beneath the waves. Danny Morrison was found dead in his apartment 3 months after we rescued him. He had drowned in his bathtub. But here's the thing that still keeps me awake at night. His apartment was on the 15th floor, and every window was open. The neighbors said they heard him humming that same tune we'd heard on the ship recordings, getting louder and louder until it suddenly stopped. The coroner said it was suicide, but I know better. The voice finally called him home. My name is Dr. Amanda Foster, and I've been a child psychologist for 15 years. I got my PhD from Stanford and worked at Children's Hospital before starting my private practice in Seattle. I've helped kids through divorce, trauma, and behavioral problems. I've seen children at their worst moments and helped them heal. But what happened on the Royal Princess cruise in August 2023 changed everything I thought I knew about child development. Some things can break a child's mind in ways that can never be fixed. I booked that cruise as a last attempt to bond with my 7-year-old daughter Emma after my divorce. The papers were signed, David had moved out, and Emma barely spoke to me anymore. She spent most days staring at her tablet or asking when Daddy was coming home. I thought maybe a week on a cruise ship, just the two of us, could help us reconnect. The Royal Princess was huge, 15 decks with pools, restaurants, and entertainment venues. But the main attraction for families was the supervised kids program. They had different age groups and promised educational activities and developmental enrichment. As a child psychologist, I knew Emma needed to socialize with other kids her age. The divorce had made her withdrawn and anxious. The kids' club was on deck 7, with bright yellow walls and cartoon characters painted everywhere. The coordinator, Helen Burke, seemed nice enough. A middle-aged woman with short gray hair and a friendly smile. She told me she used to manage a retail store before joining the cruise line 2 years ago. She explained their program included arts and crafts, educational games, and specialized learning sessions for advanced development. We focus on emotional regulation and cognitive enhancement, Helen said, showing me around the main play area. Many parents notice significant improvements in their children's behavior and learning abilities after just a few days. Emma seemed excited when I dropped her off that first morning. The other kids looked happy too. About 20 children between ages 6 and 8, all wearing matching yellow wristbands. Helen explained the wristbands help staff monitor the children's location and activities throughout the ship. But when I picked Emma up that evening, something was wrong. She walked out of the kids' club without running to hug me like usual. Her movements were stiff and mechanical. When I asked about her day, she looked straight ahead and said, "It was educational." "What did you learn, sweetheart?" "Important things about thinking correctly." The way she said it made my skin crawl. Emma had always been chatty and energetic, full of questions and silly jokes. Now she spoke in a flat, emotionless tone like she was reading from a script. That night in our cabin, Emma sat on her bed and stared at the wall for 3 hours. She didn't ask for a bedtime story or want to call her father. When I tried to touch her forehead to check for fever, she pulled away. "Physical contact interferes with the learning process," she said without looking at me. I grabbed my notebook and started writing down everything I observed. As a psychologist, I knew sudden behavioral changes in children usually indicated trauma or illness. But Emma showed no signs of physical abuse or sickness. It was like someone had drained all the emotion out of her. The next morning at breakfast, I met other parents whose children were in the program. Sarah Morrison from Chicago said her 8-year-old son Jake had stopped laughing or crying since joining the kids' club. "He just sits there and answers questions like a little robot," she said, picking at her scrambled eggs. "Yesterday I asked if he missed his dog at home, and he said emotional attachment to pets is inefficient." A father from Texas, named Bill Cooper, nodded grimly. "My daughter Amy asked me why adults cry and what makes people feel love, like emotions were some foreign concept she'd never experienced." All the parents described the same thing. Children who suddenly spoke with advanced vocabulary about psychology and behavior modification. Kids who no longer showed fear, excitement, or affection. It was like the kids' club was somehow erasing their personalities. I decided to observe the program myself. The next day, I found a window that looked into the kids' club from the deck above. What I saw made no sense. 20 children sat in perfect rows, completely motionless. They weren't playing or doing crafts. Instead, they stared at large computer screens showing rapid flashing geometric patterns, triangles, circles, and squares in bright colors that hurt my eyes to look at. Helen Burke sat at a control desk wearing headphones and monitoring what looked like medical equipment. Multiple computers displayed brainwave patterns and heart rate monitors. This wasn't a kids program. It was some kind of psychological experiment. Emma sat in the front row, a yellow cap on her head with wires leading to Helen's computers. Her eyes were completely blank as she stared at the flashing patterns. None of the children moved or blinked. They looked like little zombies. I rushed down to the kids' club entrance, but Helen blocked my way. "Parents aren't allowed during specialized learning sessions," she said firmly. "The children need to focus without distractions." "What kind of learning requires brain monitoring equipment?" Helen's smile never wavered. "We use advanced techniques to help children overcome emotional obstacles and behavioral problems. Many parents specifically request our intensive program." That night, Emma stood beside her bed for hours without moving, staring at the wall with completely blank eyes. When I tried to talk to her, she responded in the same monotone voice. "Please don't interfere with my correction process." Correction process. No 7-year-old uses words like that. I say what? Couldn't sleep. Around 3 a.m., I heard voices coming from somewhere behind our cabin wall. Following the sound, I discovered a maintenance door that led to a narrow corridor. The voices were clearer now. Helen's voice and others I didn't recognize. The corridor led to a stairway going down to what must have been a sub-level below Deck 7. I followed it carefully, my phone's flashlight showing the way. The voices grew louder as I reached a heavy metal door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." I peered through a small window in the door and saw something that made my blood freeze. It was a medical laboratory filled with sophisticated psychological conditioning equipment. 20 children, including Emma, sat in chair-like devices with electrodes attached to their temples. Multiple computer screens displayed their brainwave patterns while other monitors showed hypnotic patterns designed to suppress emotional development. I recognized some of the equipment from my graduate studies: EEG machines for monitoring brain activity, and what looked like experimental neurofeedback devices used in advanced psychological research. But this was far beyond anything used in legitimate child therapy. Helen Burke stood at a control panel, adjusting frequency settings and making notes on each child's psychological profile. She was systematically recording and modifying their brainwave patterns, using technology that could permanently alter their emotional development. Emma sat in the center chair, dozens of electrodes covering her small head. Her personality was being erased and rebuilt right in front of me. I burst through the door. "What are you doing to my daughter?" Helen turned calmly, as if she'd been expecting me. "Dr. Foster, I was hoping we could discuss Emma's progress." "Progress? You're torturing children." "I'm fixing them." Helen's voice was matter-of-fact. "Removing their capacity for emotional attachment, fear, and independent thinking. Creating perfectly obedient children who will never question authority or form problematic family bonds." I ran to Emma's chair and started pulling off the electrodes. She looked at me with no recognition in her eyes. "Please don't interfere with my correction process," Emma said in that horrible flat voice. "I need to become properly functioning." Helen continued talking as I desperately worked to free my daughter. "Several wealthy passengers hired me specifically for this service. They want their children emotionally optimized for better academic and social performance. No more tantrums, no more defiance, no more messy emotional complications. You're destroying their ability to love." "Love is inefficient," Helen said, echoing Emma's earlier words. "These children will be much happier without the burden of complex emotions. They'll excel in school, follow instructions perfectly, and never experience the pain of loss or rejection." I finally got Emma disconnected and tried to carry her toward the door. but she fought against me, trying to return to the chair. "I need to complete my behavioral modification," she said, struggling in my arms. "My correction isn't finished." The other children watched us with blank expressions, none of them showing any concern or curiosity. Helen had already stolen their capacity for empathy. I managed to get Emma to the corridor, but ship security was waiting for us. 2 officers in white uniforms blocked our path. "Dr. Foster," one of them said, "we received reports of a custody dispute breakdown. Are you trying to kidnap your own daughter?" Helen appeared behind us, looking concerned and professional. "I'm afraid Dr. Foster has been under tremendous stress since her divorce. She's been making wild accusations about our children's program and attempting to disrupt supervised activities." Emma looked up at the security officers with those terrible empty eyes. "I don't know this woman," she said. "I want to return to my correction program so I can become properly functioning like the others." The other parents found us in the corridor, all of them searching for their own children. But when we reached the kids' club, every single child refused to acknowledge their families. "My parents are disrupting my psychological development," Jake Morrison told his mother in the same flat tone. "I need to continue my behavioral modification without interference." Amy Cooper pushed her father away when he tried to hug her. "Physical contact creates inefficient emotional responses," she said. "I must return to my learning program." The security officers sedated me with some kind of injection and locked me in my cabin while Emma was returned to Helen's program for what she called intensive final conditioning. I spent the rest of the cruise screaming and pounding on my door, but no one believed me. The other parents were sedated too, and Helen had convinced the ship's staff that we were all having psychological breakdowns related to custody issues and family stress. On the last day of the cruise, I was released to collect Emma. She walked out of the kids' club looking perfectly normal, smiling and waving goodbye to her new friends. But when she looked at me, there was nothing behind her eyes. "Hello," she said politely. "Are you my transportation arrangement?" The cruise ended with all the children perfectly behaved, emotionally vacant, and completely detached from their families. The wealthy passengers who had hired Helen were delighted with the results. Their children were quiet, obedient, and showed no signs of emotional distress about anything. I tried reporting what happened to the cruise line, the FBI, and Child Protective Services. But Emma supported Helen's story that I had suffered a mental breakdown. The ship's medical staff diagnosed me with acute stress disorder and paranoid delusions. 6 months later, Emma still shows no emotional connection to me or anyone else. She functions normally. She does her homework, follows instructions, and never causes problems at school. Her teachers praise her perfect behavior and academic improvement, but she has no capacity for love, fear, or genuine human attachment. She calls me by my first name and treats me like a helpful stranger. She never asks about her father or shows any interest in friends, toys, or activities that used to make her happy. Sometimes I catch her staring at walls for hours, just like that night on the ship. When I ask what she's thinking about, she always gives the same answer: maintaining proper psychological function. The worst part is that I can't prove any of it happened. Helen Burke left the cruise line shortly after our trip, and the ship's records show only that several families participated in enhanced childcare services. There's no evidence of the equipment I saw or the conditioning program, but I know what I witnessed, and I know that somewhere out there, Helen Burke is still fixing children, removing their ability to love or be loved, creating perfectly obedient little robots who will never cause their parents any trouble. I keep Emma's medical files from before the cruise, videos of her laughing, drawings she made of our family, recordings of her silly songs and jokes, evidence of the vibrant, emotional child she used to be. Because the girl who lives with me now isn't really Emma. She's just what's left after someone stole her soul.